Delete everything in the scene. Create a circle. Make it 20 vertices. Go to the top view. Create a shape key. Let's rename it Start. Go to Edit Mode and select the vertices of the top half of the circle. Extrude them along the y-axis by 50 units. Select the top half of the circle, except for the two diameter ones. Delete those vertices. Select the bottom half of the circle, so they stay selected for the next step. Go to Object Mode and create the second shape key. Let's rename it End. Go to Edit Mode. Now with these vertices selected, move them along the y-axis by 50 units. Go back to Object Mode. Add a Bezier circle. Make it higher resolution. Scale it by 9.095 units. Select the mesh circle and add a curve modifier. Pick the curve circle we just created. Let's test the shape keys. Choose the deformation axis to be Y. Rotate the mesh by 90 degrees on the Y-axis. Add a subdivision modifier and move it to the top layer. Increase the subdivisions a little bit. Let's test the shape keys again. Go to frame 0 and add a keyframe to the Start shape key with a value of 0. Move forward 8 frames and add another keyframe with a value of 1. Go to frame 6 and add a keyframe to the End shape key with a value of 0. Go to frame 14 and add another keyframe with a value of 1. Let's disable the curve modifier temporarily. Now we want the animation to start where it ends. And keep looping with the same pattern. To do that, we first have to loop the start and end animations in place. Then we shift the whole shape by 50 units each time the looping animation ends. So let's first loop the start and end animation. Open up the graph editor. Let's make the whole animation 26 frames, so the animation holds a few frames after it finishes, and resets after 26 frames. Go to frame 26. Add a keyframe to the Start shape key with a value of 0. Select the keyframe in frame 8. Hit T and choose its type to be constant. Now it stays still with the same value until frame 26. Make sure the channel of the start value is selected and open up the right panel or hit N. Add a cycles modifier. Let's do the same thing to the end shape key. So go to frame 26 and add a keyframe with a value of 0. Select the keyframe in frame 14 and set its type to be constant. Since the whole animation is 26 frames, we have to make each animation start at frame 0. So go to frame 0 and add a keyframe to the end shape key with a value of 0, so it cycles properly. Open up the right panel or hit N, and add a cycles modifier. Now the first part cycles properly. Now we have to make the whole shape shift 50 units after the first animation ends. So go to frame 0 and set a keyframe to the Y location of the mesh with a value of 0. Go to frame 26 and add another keyframe with a value of 50. Select the first keyframe of the location curve and set it to be constant. Add a cycles modifier to it, and choose repeat with offset. Now the shape moves 50 units after 26 frames, and the start and end animation keep looping. Let's activate the curve modifier. Let's add an empty object. Parent the mesh and the curve to the empty object. Now let's add the looping rotation. Select the empty and add a keyframe to its rotation on the Z-axis at frame 0. Go to frame 26 and rotate it by -135 degrees. Set a keyframe with that value. In the graph editor, select the rotation curve and set it to be linear. Select the rotation channel and add a cycles modifier to it. Choose repeat with offset. Now the animation is working properly. Now let's add some geometry. Select the mesh and add a skin modifier. If you want to change its thickness, go to Edit Mode and with all vertices selected hit Ctrl A and change it as you like. Finally, we can add the same shadeless material that we created in the first video. Now you might notice some weirdness with the shape of the circle. This is because the two extruded diameter vertices are on top of each other, so the subdivision modifier creates this weird effect, but it won't be noticeable when you zoom out. To avoid this weird shape, you can start with a circle with more vertices than 20. Create a plane. Go to Edit mode and merge all the vertices at the center. With this single vertex selected, extrude it on the x-axis by 1 unit. Go to the front view and extrude both vertices on the z-axis by 20 units. Go back to Object mode. Let's add the scale animation. Go to Frame 1. Set a keyframe to the Z-scale with the value of 0. Go to frame 19 and set a keyframe with a value of 1. Adjust the shape of the curve to make the animation a bit more appealing. Move forward a few frames after the first animation finishes. Set a keyframe to the rotation on the y-axis with 0 degrees. Go to frame 44 for example and add another keyframe with a value of 400 degrees. Adjust its shape a little bit to add some appeal to the animation. Now we will add some animation to the scale of the mesh on the x-axis to make it disappear. Go a couple of frames before the animation ends. Add a keyframe to the X scale of the shape with a value of 0. Move backwards about 6 frames for example and add a keyframe to the X scale with a value of 1. I like to delay the scale animation 2 frames so it doesn't start too early. This depends on your style, of course. Go back a little bit in the timeline. Duplicate this mesh. Go to Edit mode. Select the 2 vertices on the right side and delete them. Go to the graph editor. Isolate only the scale curves by selecting their channels and hit Shift-H. Hit A to select all the scale keyframes and delete them. Reset the scale of the shape by hitting Alt-S. Add a screw modifier. Choose the Y-axis. Go to the fastest part of the animation and add a keyframe to the screw angle with a value like -75 degrees. If your mesh is flipped, make sure to check flip. Move backwards some frames and set a keyframe with a value of 0 degrees. Set another keyframe with a value of 0 degrees before the animation ends with a couple of frames. Go to the graph editor and select the keyframe in the middle. Hit V and set its type to be free. Adjust its shape so it doesn't look weird when playing with the rotating movement. Add an empty object. Parent those 2 meshes to the empty object. Now select all the objects and duplicate them. Select the second empty object and rotate it by 180 degrees. Move it on the x-axis by 1 unit. I like to add a third empty object to control the first two. Move it on the x-axis by 0.5 unit. Select the first two empty objects and parent them to the third one. Select any of the meshes and add the shadeless material to it. Select the other meshes and shift-select the one with the material to make it the active object. Hit Ctrl L to link its material to their material. Let's select all and move them to a new collection, just for more organization. We can add more appeal to the animation by shifting some keyframes of one of the two animations to avoid symmetry. Make the scale on the z-axis of the second shape ends a couple of frames earlier. We can also adjust the shape of the smear on one of the objects a little bit, so they are not typically identical.